Hello and welcome back to my 10 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video because after hitting $80,000 for the first time last week, this week Bitcoin briefly traded above $90,000. And this now has Bitcoin investors looking forward to the next major milestone of 100K per Bitcoin. So it's no surprise that we're seeing some early profit taking at these psychological levels before Bitcoin can continue its way higher. And I know I caused a bit of confusion in my last video by trying to capture a little too much information with this Bitcoin cycle scenarios chart. There's clearly a lot of overlap between the different scenarios, and the terminology is a bit weird because some of them focus on timing and others focus on price action difficulty. So I decided to break it up into two separate charts, a Bitcoin cycle scenarios chart that ignores price and just focuses strictly on timing and when this cycle is likely to peak, and then a separate chart which focuses on support levels, price action, and what I expect will be the most likely thing Bitcoin will do over the next few weeks and months. Now, the type of cycle we're going to have is going to be heavily driven by macro. The broken cycle scenario, which I think is unlikely, would require some type of major recession to hit imminently. This is something the macro doomers have been calling for months now. The normal cycle is just your standard Bitcoin 4-year cycle. We just maintain our current trend from the bear market bottom and work our way up to the post-halving year top in Q4 of 2025. But what I think is the most likely is a shortened cycle. This cycle has been way ahead of schedule multiple times, whether it was making an all-time high before the halving or what we're seeing here recently of entering price discovery aggressively towards the end of the halving year instead of waiting for the post-halving year for the party to get started. So I am watching Q1 to Q2 for a cycle top for Bitcoin, but I am open to these other outcomes and will be watching them closely. And the way we'll actually know when it's the top is by focusing on price action. We got quite bullish when Bitcoin had this clear breakout because each and every time this has happened, Bitcoin has continued to the upside after breaking above previous ranges or having major bullish reclaims of previous ranges. But tops tend to occur on fake outs to the upside because everybody piles in onto a breakout, price does not continue higher and instead closes below, and this is usually the major warning sign to look for Bitcoin to actually have a major top, and we have not seen anything near that price action quite now. So I don't want to be one of those people that jumps to conclusions and tries to predict the top over and over again, or even worse, tries shorting the market and just lose money along the way by fighting the momentum. And based on current structure and momentum, I have to expect Bitcoin to continue grinding higher here. I'm always open to a decent sized pullback as long as we're doing it above the previous all-time high. We really wouldn't want to see a fallback below that level. And then there is always a chance of a huge shakeout because something breaks in macro, but I find that very unlikely based on current data and current structure. So I have it marked out as unlikely, and I don't think that the cycle is over. I don't think Bitcoin has topped already, but it's an option nonetheless. So I have it listed here as very unlikely. But things still look pretty good. We're seeing a lot of inflows still coming into the Bitcoin spot ETFs, and we're seeing their holdings continue to skyrocket. And it's a good sign that we haven't seen too much Bitcoin profit taking quite yet, even though price essentially teleported from under 70,000 to just under 90,000 in only 2 weeks. And that's due to the fact that we have a very strong narrative right now thanks to the Trump win surrounding the Bitcoin strategic reserve. And these narratives tend to be over exaggerated. I don't think the US is going to be buying tons of Bitcoin anytime soon, especially because the US government already holds over 200,000 Bitcoin, which is over 1% of the supply. So it wouldn't surprise me if the strategic reserve was just them not deciding to sell the Bitcoin they're already holding. And let's not forget that almost 800,000 Bitcoin are held by US investors in the spot ETFs. You also have MicroStrategy with over 250,000 Bitcoin. You have companies like Robinhood and Coinbase that are publicly traded, and they hold an absurd amount of Bitcoin as well. So if you ask me, if you look at what the US government is already holding and you look at how much Bitcoin is being held by Americans or by American companies, I think the US already has has a Bitcoin strategic reserve and will already benefit significantly if Bitcoin were to do well over the next few years. So for now, there's really not much to do but remain calm and not do anything too drastic with our portfolios. As long as we're trading above the previous all-time high, there's really nothing to worry about in my opinion. This wick doesn't look amazing, but that's what you would expect after such a strong move. And even though we knew Bitcoin would be volatile in Q4, and especially in this month of November, this week has been one of the craziest weeks I've ever had in this market ever since joining in 2017. And with that volatility, especially when it's to the upside, it's really no surprise that we're seeing extreme greed in this market right now. We're seeing very high open interest as investors are speculating on Bitcoin upside and downside. And it's no surprise that we're seeing huge liquidations in both directions thanks to this volatility. And although we have to remain optimistic in the short term based on current price action and momentum, there are some warning signs out there as well. I've been getting a lot of messages about the tether dominance and this trend line that has always marked local tops on Bitcoin, and we're testing it right now. Now, we do have to expect this trend line to break eventually. We're not going to expect tether dominance to steadily increase forever. And another variable is as long as the tether supply continues increasing, it can maintain the same percentage dominance while Bitcoin price goes up. So yes, this is a cause for caution in the short term, but we also have to keep an eye on tether supply as well, because it's been increasing quite aggressively recently ever since the election. So it can still hold this level for a while longer while Bitcoin continues going higher because of that supply increase. But the real elephant in the room for Bitcoin is the dollar index knocking on the door of a range breakout. Bitcoin has been able to ignore the dollar strength for a while, but we're now officially in the risk-off area. And historically, the dollar index trading above 106.50 has caused corrections in Bitcoin, but we'll have to see how this actually develops. The dollar index continues to put downward pressure on global liquidity, and Bitcoin has been able to ignore that thanks to its strong narratives for now. But we'll have to wait and see if that actually continues. And it's actually interesting that crypto investors have been celebrating Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, aka Doge, even though reducing government spending is actually bullish for the dollar's value globally and the dollar index, which hasn't been great for Bitcoin and altcoins historically. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that narrative develops over the next few weeks. And I have a hard time seeing how they're going to be able to reduce government spending significantly when the majority of government spending is done on things like Social Security, Medicare, defense spending, and interest for the debts. So I don't know what they're going to be cutting. Maybe they'll be able to trim some stuff here and there. But this narrative is definitely bullish for the dollar index. So we'll see how that develops and how long Bitcoin can ignore that dollar index strength. And we're still seeing altcoins lag behind Bitcoin's performance, perhaps due to that strength in the US dollar. And we're expecting it to roll over between now and end of year. So we'll continue monitoring it to see when the optimal time to rotate into altcoins will be. We're still waiting for the Fed to announce going back to increasing their balance sheet and going back to QE, something they still haven't announced yet. And perhaps the FOMC meeting on December 18th would be the perfect place to make that announcement, because as of right now, the market is only expecting 3 rate cuts in this cutting cycle that are left before rates stay paused at 4%. So the recent strength in the dollar isn't that surprising when you see how few rate cuts the market has currently priced in. But anyway, in terms of my portfolio, I haven't made any changes quite yet, but I do plan on locking in at least some profits quite soon. Ethereum price action continues to look pretty bad, even though Bitcoin has had an amazing week. So far, it's been a clear rejection off of our range mid, and now it's been going sideways. One of the main narratives Ethereum had going for it was BlackRock's BUIDL fund, which was a money market fund launched on Ethereum, but they just announced yesterday they're going to launch it on about 6 other chains as well, which takes that narrative away from Ethereum a bit. We're still seeing Solana catch up quite a bit on activity and general usage, especially with the meme coin frenzy we've seen recently. So the Ethereum researchers are left with no choice but to invent a time machine to finally try and make prices go up. And so far, it looks like the market doesn't quite care yet. But as we look forward, there is some optimistic things happening for Ethereum. We are seeing some inflow starting to come in, and perhaps a new SEC chair would allow the ETFs to stake their Ethereum and pass those staking rewards on to the spot ETF holders. But until this actually gets announced, it's really a waiting game, and Ethereum continues to disappoint with its price action. As for Solana, completely different story, still holding above its previous range high, and as long as it's holding above that level, upside looks very likely, but a lot can happen between now and the weekly close, so we're just going to have to wait and see how this price action develops. But it's still a completely different story between Solana and Ethereum when it comes to their charts and their price action, especially accounting for the fact that Bitcoin has gone vertical over the past 2 weeks. As for economic data, we did get a CPI print yesterday and things came in line, so nothing to worry about there with CPI or core CPI. In terms of labor market, initial jobless claims came in this morning and still nothing to worry about there. No major signs of increasing layoffs. Continuing claims haven't been going up much either. Yes, we're concerned about the non-farm payrolls, and we're going to get an update on this in 3 weeks or so, as well as an update on the unemployment rate. But for now, no major warning signs of imminent recession quite yet. The S&P 500 and traditional markets continue to look okay, which is a good backdrop for Bitcoin to consolidate here. We did finally get an update to what the national deficit is as of right now, starting the fiscal year of 2025 in just October alone, and so far it's close to 260 billion. So it looks like the fiscal deficit train isn't slowing down anytime soon, which means more government debt and more money supply expansion, which means fiat currency debasement. So we have to be bullish on risk assets like the S&P 500 and definitely have to remain bullish on risk assets like Bitcoin, which is only 2 weeks into its expansion phase. And that's one of the main reasons why I think we have a couple more months to go. We're only 2 weeks into this expansion period, and after such a long consolidation, it's hard to imagine that we top within the next few weeks, but anything is possible and we'll continue to monitor it and will remain open to those various outcomes, even though one outcome is by far the most likely, in my opinion. But as always, let me know what you expect. Is this going to be a shortened cycle where we front run the previous cycle's price action like we've seen so far and we top in Q1 or Q2 of 2025? Or do we get a normal cycle where we get 12 months of a rallying and uptrend and top sometime late in 2025? Or do you think it's all over and Bitcoin tops between now and the end of 2024? Would love to know what you expect. As always, thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.